to Victoria Rumble Room, the show that peels down on the issues on Vancouver Island, British Columbia, and yes, the entire planet. And speaking of the world, we have with us across town a world champion water polo player and also leader in the business community, John Jurisic, also known as the Croatian sensation.
Speechless, even though I've read it, even though I've reviewed it, even though I've planned for something, when it comes out of you, it just sounds so majestic. Thank you, Rockin' Robin. Attaboy, I love it.
Hey, I was talking to somebody and we were talking about the show, and he says, why do you call it the Rumble Room? You guys could call it the Romper Room, the way you goof around out there. And I said, well, we're like Led Zeppelin. Sometimes we're heavy and sometimes we're light.
Exactly. Well, listen, it's been proven that this kind of internet communication, if it doesn't sort of have a foundational sort of genuineness to it, people bail. And you and I are very genuine, but we will commit to never showing people what we talk about offline. Okay, how about we do that, blood brother? Hey, listen, we have a really jam-packed program this morning, and I'm humbled and I'm saddened, but I am honored that we have Leslie McBain speaking to us from Moms Stop the Harm. This is a tragic reason to gather and organize and mobilize, but these are mothers that have lost their children, their sons and their daughters, to the opioid crisis, and they're now going to make a lot of noise around this issue. So we're going to be talking to Leslie soon.
Yeah, it's the other big pandemic. Even Dr. Bonnie Henry's talked about it as the other major pandemic. As we see COVID-19 gratefully and finally starting to recede, we have this terrible opioid crisis, and it is killing thousands of people. It's a terrible thing.
Yes.
And we're really looking forward to talking more with Leslie about what can be done, because there's a lot of work ahead.
Yeah.
But John, let's shift to a couple of short snappers before we get to Leslie. And I guess it's a dark time right now in terms of our relationship with our First Nations.
Robin, yesterday I attended as a witness a gathering at Tsewat out on the Tsewat Nation, out on the peninsula. And they were beginning to mobilize and organize and talk through what has happened in Kamloops, the uncovering of a graveyard with 215 children. And I don't know entirely what we're going to do or how we're going to react to this. What we are now knowing as a country, which the First Nations, Indigenous communities knew all the time and have been telling us all the time, is that residential schools were institutionalized slavery. They were institutionalized sexual abuse. They were a complete horror show, and clearly a terrible mistake. And I don't know where we're going to go from here.
That's well said, John. And I think we all have a very dark response to how this has come down. It's a big black eye for Canada, a black eye for our heritage, and how we have responded to the situation of our First Nations over the many generations. I'm a sixth generation Canadian, and I'm very proud of being Canadian, and I'm very proud of the way my family contributed to building this country. But part of the building went very, very wrong when it comes to our First Nations. I read Jack Knox's article in the Times Colonist. He talked about being a young kid growing up in Kamloops and driving by that giant residential school in Kamloops where they found those graves. He used to drive by regularly on his way to school. And then they closed the school, but they kept the residence open. And suddenly he's going to school with those same kids, and he found them kind of tough, and I didn't really understand them. And, I can really resonate with that. I grew up in Mission, BC. And you can imagine Mission, BC was named that for a reason. We had also a giant residential school. It was called St. Mary's, run by the Roman Catholics. It was on the edge of town. Didn't know much about it growing up until grade 7, when they closed the school but kept the residence open. And suddenly in my grade 7 class, we had a whole row of kids from the native school. They all had names like Carl Sam and Henry Joe and Arnold Peters and Thelma Jack. and they were really quiet. They were really guarded, and they weren't really interested in spending time with us. They, I'm sure, saw us as quite privileged. They saw us living in comfortable homes, and I don't imagine that they felt very happy about being there. And we didn't really understand them. We were from different planets. They were just tough kids to us. And I really feel now, in retrospect, as I look back at that time and look at my life, that I wished I'd done more, and I'll try to do better today. And I hope a lot of Canadians feel that way, that this is a chance for us to try to find a way to understand our First Nations people and reach out. We collectively share in this terrible legacy, and let's hope we can do something about it. So to the Henry Jacks and the Carl Sams and all the other First Nations kids that I grew up with, I say, I'm very sorry. I just didn't understand. And that's one of the reasons that I'd like to send a message out to our protesters out at Fairy Creek who are upset about the old growth forests and the logging. There have been thousands of protesters going up to Fairy Creek. It's just west of Lake Cowichan, old growth forest up there, and they want to stop the logging. The protesters also include some First Nations activists. However, the Pashadat First Nation, they claim the traditional territory, and both the elected chief, the hereditary chief, the majority of people with the Pashadat are saying, we want the logging. It creates jobs, it creates economic activity. It's something that we want, and they need the employment. They're tired of people from outside telling them how they should live. I believe the protesters should stop blaming the British Columbia government and the logging company and start a dialogue with the Pashadat people. Maybe the government could sit down with the two groups and they could work something out. This should be fairly resolved. Old growth forest is very important, but I think considering what we've seen in Kamloops, we know that the rights of our First Nations are also extremely important. Let's get this issue cleared up so that all of us can move forward as a people in a positive way. So that's my thoughts on that, John. Other issues going on. Schools.
Whew, hard to come off that. That was brilliantly said. We're now clearly in a period of time in which our white culture will try to understand how to say sorry. I don't know how to say sorry except to just say it. And I hope that we will spend time in the future talking about this issue at length. One of the key elements of an Indigenous culture is art, is singing, is music. And of course, that is an ongoing issue within our community. And it impacted, it has impacted policy, it has impacted people protesting on the street, that being the music cuts. We've talked about it aggressively, endlessly, it seems. And there was a decision recently about restoring the full amount of the cuts. To date, we're not sure of what that decision will be. I'm certain, I'm confident that they will be fully restored. What have you heard, Rob?
Well, I've heard that they are moving towards a model that, at least for this next year, is going to bring back most of the music programming, but there's no confidence in the longer term future. I think we have to look at a different way of funding our education programs. Yes. We've been down this trail so many times, different governments, different models. It's still not working out very well. I feel sympathy. I've said it before for the school trustees. I think they've been given some parameters. They're trying to work within them. And it's a very unhappy situation. But in the darkness, we've just talked about a couple of areas that there's been a lot of contention, but there's some happiness to report for dog owners in Saanich.
Well, once again, as the representative Saanich citizen and proud dog owner, recently a motion was passed at Saanich Council that no leashes are required to have dogs roam around some of our parks and some of our park areas, including Mount Doug, Panama Flats, of which I live. I could throw a rock and hit Panama Flats. So, as much as I teased last week about the electric leaf blowers, I'm actually supportive of this decision. It's important to talk about these things at a municipal level. Finally, that's what municipal politicians should talk about. And interestingly enough, this is a dog-friendly area. That's what we do. We love our dogs.
Well,
If
good,
they're
good
going
for
to be,
Fred Hayes and his council for, I think, making a reasonable decision. People who have dogs also have a responsibility to clean up after themselves, keep aggressive dogs at bay, all the things that trouble people that just want to go for a nice hike and don't want to be bothered by dogs. But I think we should all be able to get along. So it's good news.
Excellent.
Now we move, John, to our major story of the morning, the thing that we were talking about off the top of the show, and that is the opioid pandemic raging across North America. And we're on the West Coast, so we're really a gateway to a lot of these hard drugs that are coming into North America. And on top of that, doctors for quite some time have been prescribing drugs that have narcotics in them, and people get dependent on those drugs. And then if they can't get them, they go to the street and get drugs, and then they get hooked, and then they've got an additional mess. So what do we do about this drug problem as we move forward? There are much stronger drugs like fentanyl now getting mixed in, and that's killing people. It's killing a lot of young people. The death rate is just skyrocketing. Mums Against the Harm have been formed by families that have lost loved ones in this pandemic. And for those who want to get clean, there are very few options right now in our society. It costs money. So if it costs money, we're always reluctant to, do something about these things. We just hope they're going to go away. Well, this problem is not going away. Something needs to be done. And from Mums Stop the Harm, we're now joined by its co-founder, Leslie McBain.
Leslie, welcome to the Victoria Rumble Room. And this beautiful sunny day, you're sitting, I understand, on one of our gorgeous islands, Pender Island.
Correct. Yeah, it's beautiful here.
Well, as I mentioned earlier in our opening, I'm very pleased and honored to see you and chat with you. Unfortunately, it's a very sad issue that you are supporting and organizing and now
Advocating for.
Yes, thank you.
I'm just here to help, John. I'm just here to help.
His live to tape is fantastic. And of course, it's a tragic issue that we're dealing with, and it's all part of what is happening in Lower Vancouver Islands. This notion of folks on the street, and that reasons why they're on the street, the drug addictions, the crime, the community impact. It's terrible, and we're trying to put them into homes. We're trying to put them into residential care, and there's not the supportive services. And we continue to see these opioid counts get larger and larger. Tell us, what's the solution? What are your goals of your group? What are you trying to do?
The ultimate goal of our group is, and the goal that we began with is to advocate for drug policies that support the lives of people who use drugs. Now, that sounds simple. It's not simple. And in fact, our goal back, 6 years ago when we started Mums Stop the Harm, we didn't know very much about the scene, about the drug scene. And what we've learned since is, well, we've learned it's really complex. Every single person who is addicted to any to drugs, to illicit drugs or legal prescription drugs, every person is different. So we can't lump them into one basket and say, well, these people need this. For instance, the tent cities. Let's start there. The tent cities that have sprung up around the country, but we're talking about BC and specifically Victoria. The people in the tents have problems ranging from severe early childhood trauma to intergenerational trauma to severe mental health issues to minor mental health issues plus addiction. It is some of the people that I've spoken to in the tent cities are smart, brilliant, actually brilliant people who are creative and who know what's going on, yet they have addiction, they have no way out. And this is largely because of lack of government services. One of the things that we've learned is that if you don't have a roof over your head, there's no way you're going to recover from your addictions or have mental health issues treated. So housing is really primary, but it has to be supportive housing. It has to be housing with services attached that will help people get into balance and to live a decent life.
Leslie, it's interesting that in some countries, and I think we've grown so despondent about this situation. We're looking for solutions that we never would have thought of maybe a generation ago, because people were so appalled by the idea of people taking intravenous drugs and on the streets. And there was a lot of sort of general stereotyping of the sort of people that would become addicted to drugs. But now we look at places like Switzerland, where now they've made drugs more available, and you can go to a center and get your drugs and know that those drugs are clean. You can take them on the site. For many addicts, they can still get jobs, be employable, and they're not harming themselves or others. The crime rates have dropped, prostitution has dropped, and there's more programs in place to help people that want to get off of drugs. So are those models you look at longingly now?
Yes. And if I could just stop for a second and yell at my dog, it would be helpful.
Sure, we all love to do that.
Oh, he stopped now. He thought he heard something.
Good.
Okay, sorry about that.
Carry on, please carry on.
So Switzerland is a good example of what we would like to see, no doubt. Safer supply has been implemented years ago. There are services for people. There are facilities for people with severe mental illness. And there's just everything we wish we had. And, you know, first of all, I personally do not think we will ever cure addiction. Addiction has been with us for 10,000 years. People are addicted to all kinds of different things for different reasons. It's too big a job for any government, much less any, NGO like ourselves. So what we must do is do the best we can for people with addictions and people with mental health issues. We are doing so little. And that's why we have tent cities. That's why we have incredibly high rates of overdose deaths. They aren't really overdose deaths, as we call them. They're toxic drug poisonings. Because the government can't see its way to implement a regulated, organized, safer supply for people who are addicted, they're forced onto the street, into the illicit drug market, into the black market. And it's really, I always say it's really the only medical disorder, and it's called substance use disorder, and all doctors will agree, a medical condition wherein we force the people who have it onto the streets, into excuse me, sketchy situations where they're buying dangerous drugs from dangerous people, possibly. It just doesn't make any sense. So
and again, we love to stereotype what these people are like.
Yeah.
Somebody who would fall into that, they have obviously very weak character and a lot of problems, and they're looking for trouble. All these things we kind of allocate to people that we see in these situations. But the simple truth of the matter is, some of them are just normal people that have just fallen into a bad situation and now are in a terrible mess and need some help. I wanted you maybe to comment about the 12-year-old girl who just died, I believe, about a month ago. Her name was Alia Thomas, in grade 6, went to Gordon Head Middle School. She got into meth and heroin at the age of 11, went downtown with a friend, and they took some heroin that I assume had other drugs attached to it, and she died of an overdose. So she's just an illustration of so many young people that have so much promise, that to make mistakes, God knows we've all made mistakes, but these are terrible, fatal mistakes that they've made.
Yeah. This young girl, from what we read and what is publicly known through her mom and the media, had a very rough life from beginning to the end of 12 years old. She was in and out of care, and she was, we don't know all the details, but we know it was difficult. It was difficult for her mom and her dad, and she fell into drugs. The reason people take drugs is to feel better, period. And it, you know, it could be physical pain, it could be fear, it could be mental health issues, it could be all these things. This young girl, I'm guessing, was needing to get away from her life, whatever that looked like. The system, it sounds like the system failed her in many ways. And so it's, you know, it's tragic, it's heartbreaking. I mean, we can hardly believe that a 12-year-old would die of, and I believe it was not an overdose, but toxic drug poisoning.
Right.
She was not a naive, what we call naive drug user. She was a pretty seasoned drug user, even at 12.
Wow.
So I'm going to assume that she died of a fentanyl-laced drug. So yeah, like I say, the system has failed this little girl and her mother, from what we know. I don't think she would have taken easily to offers of care or treatment at the point she was at. She seemed like a real little powerhouse, you know, and she was doing her own thing. And I don't think she's typical. I think she's atypical of what we see in youth. However, we can't ignore what happened to her, and we can't ignore the gaps in the systems.
Leslie, I've been concerned about this interview for me.
Mhm.
Personally, I have four children, they're now adults.
Mhm.
And the thought of what has happened to you and all these other kids and young adults is almost overwhelming. And I admire your courage and your determination to make a change. Thank you, thank you, thank you. What therefore would be some immediate steps? You're now talking to the premier or the minister responsible.
Mhm.
What should be taken now for us to hopefully turn the tide on this opioid pandemic?
Yeah. And that is the question. And to us, to Mom Stop the Harm, to me personally, the single most important thing that the Ministry of Mental Health and Addictions and the government can do right now is to implement a safe supply of drugs. And so if a person, no matter who we're talking about, whether we're talking about kids like my middle-class white son, or people who have, you know, severe mental health, et cetera, all the things, you know, trauma, racism, all the things that people suffer, they can't recover, they can't balance their lives if they're dead. It's as simple as that. So if the government was able, through clinics, through medical, through ERs, through safe consumption sites, that are medically supervised, if there could be a safe supply of drugs for people who are addicted, then those people won't die, and those people have a chance to stabilize. We know this, the evidence shows this, that when people are not drug seeking, which people who are addicted have to do every day, they have to think, I mean, we have to understand addiction too, and how powerful the need is to continue to take the drug you're addicted to. People get sick and die in withdrawal, in fact. So we have to look at the actual facts. And the fact is, if the government could, and I know they talk about it, and I'm on committees, and I know the complexities and the barriers and all the things, but the way I look at it, nothing is impossible. So if we could have low barrier, regulated, safe drugs for people, that is where to start. And concurrent with that is, for people who do not have homes, some kind of roof over their head.
They're doing the roof part.
That's a starting place.
It's just somewhere to start. And you do hear noises. And the Insight, there's been a pilot project, I think, at Insight, at least in Vancouver, where they have been making heroin available, which I've always thought was the way it needed to go. I never liked the idea of Insight simply being a place where you could go with your drugs that you've got from nefarious means. You may have had to prostitute yourself or sell drugs to others or break into cars or homes to get that drug money to have those drugs. I'd rather the government provided them, and it would, it's still a tragedy, but at least it's not a major criminal track to get you to the Insight. I guess my final question for you this morning, Leslie, is maybe again, if you could just talk maybe about your son and how that happened, and then just what's your experience of people that get into drugs, the young people? I mean, is it often people that just sort of bad circumstances. And I mean, we always have this stereotype in our minds of, hardened people and, really bad decisions, but that they're tough and they're criminals and they're out of control and massively mentally ill. And those are the people we stereotype as drug addicts. Maybe you could clarify for us a little bit this morning about, about 7,000 people that have passed away in the last, since 2015 or something, and who these people are, who your son was.
Yeah. Well, as I say, every single person, just like people who are addicted or not addicted, you, me, all of the three of us here, we're all different. So every person who chooses to take a drug the first time is different. So you have my son in particular. Okay, so he was a charming, lovely, funny, attractive, popular kid. He had a good life here. He grew up here on Pender Island. Things were good. In his middle teens, I would say, probably around 15, he and his pals were drinking, at the swimming hole, and we're smoking pot. And we, the parents here on Pender Island, we were concerned. We had meetings at the school, to try and tell these kids of the dangers of, using substances. And so it wasn't like we weren't watching, we were. Most of the kids over the few years, sort of, I would say, aged out of that kind of partying. My son, Jordan, got caught. And I, I can think back, well, let's see what happened in his life. Now, he was diagnosed with attention deficit disorder in grade 4. He had some dyslexia.
Right.
He was a risk taker. He was a thrill seeker. He had some components that they now see as precursors to substance use. And so that's the only thing that I can look at. He had everything. He had everything he needed. His dad and I were stable, stable, everything was in place. When he was 19, when he was 18, he graduated high school and then went to live with some pals. They did a lot of drinking and a lot of pot and probably other things too. And by the time he was 19, he came to his dad and I and said, I'm addicted to cocaine and to alcohol and I need to go to treatment. So we got him into treatment. It worked for a short while and then he relapsed. The relapse rate for people who are in recovery is amazingly high, and it goes anywhere from 7 to 20 times in a lifetime.
Wow.
It's not substance use disorder is not something that can be fixed by 6 weeks or 12 weeks in a recovery facility. It takes counseling, it takes groups, it takes a lot of work, and the system is not set up for this. So Jordan ended up relapsing. He died of a combination of prescription drugs that he received from doctors, and he took the a wrong combination of drugs one day, and it stopped his heart. And all the drugs were in therapeutic amounts. So he made a big mistake, but
Right.
at the same time, he was addicted. So yeah, that's the story of my son, and many of the families in our organization have similar stories. Many have not severe, but certainly have mental health issues. Some have had trauma, all the things that I said before. So the only difference between the middle class white kids that are homed and have a future in front of them and the people that we see on the street, the only difference is circumstances. It's not about and the commonality, of course, is they're addicted. All I want to say in addition to that is that to parents who might be listening to this, who have kids that they're concerned about, to not assume anything, to not assume that everything will go away, to address the problem in a gentle, kind, non-judgmental way, and to not give up.
Wow, John, that was really powerful. Thanks very much to Leslie McBain. And we certainly will want to have the Mums Against the Harm back on this show in the very near future. And just powerful stuff.
Robin, that was a tough interview in as much as every parent should know, knows that at any point their kids are inches away from that happening to them. That became very personal, very, very tough, because you just know that we're in a society in which these risks are so rampant, they're so strong, they're so powerful, they're all around us at any given point. And so that was tough. She was a trooper. Very, very proud and humbled to hear Leslie's work and commitment and advocacy. Something's got to be done that's going to fix this problem.
And it can't be just moving the tents. It can't just be moving the tents.
It's now permeating into every part of what we're doing. Something has to be fixed. It's reflective of what's going on with our homeless situation.
Right. And we have, of course, the tents moving out of some of those hot spots like Beacon Hill Park. And, I think that it's going to be interesting talking to Lisa Helps, the mayor of Victoria, here in a couple of weeks' time. We've got her lined up to come for a chat and ask her a number of things about Beacon Hill Park, including her seeking a 2-year moratorium on camping in the park.
What's up with 2 years? Why not always? What? Okay, I know, we'll get her. Okay.
Well, we'll ask her, because there is a trust that says there's not supposed to be any camping. And the city decided to ignore the trust. And of course, the Friends of the Park are outraged. It's gone to the court, and a judge is going to have to decide who actually has the say. The city could dispel all of this by saying, yeah, we actually agree with the trust. There shouldn't be any more camping in the park, and that would be the end of it. And it'll be interesting to hear what the mayor has to say about that. But
it feels like our society is en masse moving towards that situation that's happening in the States after every single mass gun shooting. My prayers and heart are with you. We're done with that.
Yeah.
We want solutions. Can't wait to hear our discussion with Lisa.
We're business guys, John. We like to see solutions at the end of a problem. We like to solve things, and I think maybe that makes us a little different than some of the people we're describing. So we'll get into that. Most of those tents, as I mentioned, have gone, but there are still RVs and campers parked in the park and on the perimeter. And our eyes and ears in James Bay, Paul Beasley took some photos that show.
I love Paul Beasley. Love him.
Love the guy. And some of these vehicles have been parked at the park for quite some time, several months. Stephen Andrew, the councillor, says that there are now people from the city going in and getting tickets out, and that indeed some of the RVs are leaving, and there aren't RVs now at the petting zoo. So that's good news, but they're on the perimeter. So what's the solution there? These are also people, I guess, who are on the edges of society, and they have been living there because they are, I guess, just getting by. And what's the long-term solution to that? I don't know. We'll stay tuned. But speaking of staying tuned, John, if you cruise around the internet dial, which I know you do daily,
literally 24/7,
because you yourself are pretty well on every section of that dial.
That's right.
Except the Best Coast Political Podcast.
Really?
They haven't had you on yet, as far as I know, John. But there's always a chance. But the host of that particular program is Matt Dell, a father, cyclist, and somebody very interested in economic development and development of our city in the future. And he is now plugged in to join us.
Indeed. Robin, joining us now in the Victoria Rumble Room is Matt Dell. Now, it's so great to have you, Matt, because fellow podcaster, I've been doing podcasts since, I think, pre-war. Good 80, 90 years, and loving it, and we were kind of isolated with the programs that I was doing, John, Paul, and Mike, and et cetera, and I enjoyed it. Not until I met Robin was there really some structure and purpose and value to what we were doing. So it's so great to have a fellow podcaster on the show today. Tell us a little bit, why did you start, and why are you doing it, and how's it going?
Good question. I don't know why I'm doing it, honestly. I think it was a pandemic project, I love being active and being in the community and meeting people and, going to pubs and whatever. And that all kind of came to a halt in the pandemic. And I'm an extrovert and I like, just catching up on what's happening. And so my friend Jeremy, who we started with, just said, let's just take our conversations online. Let's do what we did in the pub. let's do it right here. And Jeremy and I come at things from a different perspective. I mean, we're both environmentalists, we're both dads, we're both into community building, but we get into
You're also young.
quite a few disagreements, and disagreements are fine. And we thought, why not, we're respectful with our disagreements, and why not just put this on the air and do something while we're in lockdown. And that was the impetus for the whole thing.
So how's it going? Like, are you finding people stopping you on the street? Hey, I know who you are.
No, not quite that, but it's going really well. I think more people listen than I would ever expect. Just random people here and there, because every guest, same as you guys, the guests share it on their networks, and then that person's network opens it up and people go through. And this is never going to be a big successful podcast. Ours is Victoria based. It's very niche, but there's a lot of people in Victoria who want to know about issues. Like, one of the most fascinating we did was on the Maritime Museum, and what's going on? Why did they leave Langford? And there was some drama. There was
also, why were they going there in the first place?
Yeah.
I mean, where's the water in Langford other than Langford Lake, right? I mean,
Right.
Absolutely. Like Costco in Langford,
Yeah.
Everyone had that question. So why not just talk about it? And it's been nice for me to explore issues like that one. What's the role of a museum that kind of talks about our colonial legacy as a seafaring, a settler society? And it's an interesting question that it was nice to hear about. And they said, hey, we have this new diversity group that's looking into, work with the Songhees, that's looking into how what were women doing this period? What were kids doing this period? What were people of different backgrounds? And that's really fascinating to me. And it was nice to hear that. And, that might not be interesting to people, but you never know. It's still, it's been going good. I'm happy.
that's great. We were chatting, you and I, yesterday, Matt, because we had some ideas of some things we might talk about. And there was a little concern about a couple of the areas that I was interested in maybe discussing with you. I thought, well, we'll get the perspective of somebody who's a little younger than us and has a bit of a different background than we do, about the tents at Beacon Hill and about the protesters at Fairy Creek. And you were a little concerned because I think you unwittingly stepped on a bit of a landmine this week about, the whole protest deal and how it was being perceived, because you have a job that sometimes people would look at you and say, what the heck do you think you're doing running a podcast in the first place?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, this is the same for you guys. We're in this era where, Facebook, okay, you can type it out, you read it, you hit post, you don't, you delete it. But coming on a podcast, it's just right on what's on the front of your brain. And for me, that's really scary, because I like to work through my ideas out loud. I like to say 3 dumb things and I finally kind of find the correct one. And if those dumb things are on the air, that's kind of scary. And so what happened last week, was I posted a photo that I just found. I was 10 o'clock at night. I posted a photo of a big tree I found. I was watching a TV show, and
huge tree, huge stump.
And it was a powerful photo. There's no doubt about that. What it meant is up for a million interpretations. And of course, I woke up the next day and it had been around the world 10 million times by different politicians and different. And it was a real panic. I really had a bad day that day. Again, it's very close to my work. I'm a civil servant, so I don't speak as a civil servant. That's what I do confidentially. And it was a tough situation. So
But you went viral. You went viral. You got a viral badge on your wall.
I guess so. I mean, my kids probably think that's cool. They always are into going viral, but they didn't seem to think this was too cool. And again, so I'm always a bit sensitive, and I'm also sensitive about talking things I don't know about. Maybe as a civil servant.
That's one of our strengths on this show.
It sure is.
Well, I've been a policymaker for 15 years. I'm in legislation, and one thing you realize is everything is infinitely complicated. Like, words are complicated, little sentences of legislation. So to talk about something even like Beacon Hill, this is one of the most divisive and challenging issues I think that the city's ever faced since I've been here. And I kind of went, I don't know if I'm the expert to talk about that, other than, my take on it really quickly is it's really highlighted a need for me and the city of our affordable housing crisis. Like, I want to live in a city where people don't have to live in the park. Nothing about this has been good. We need more housing. We need more community supports. Where are those happening? I'm not an expert and I don't know, but.
Well, let me tell you, it's actually not originally one of the more decisive issues that came across city conversations, because the original divisive conversation was the bike lanes and the building of the bike lanes.
Yes.
And where they, and no secret, I was and still am. I'm a supporter of Lisa Helps. I think she's great. I think her council has got terrible problems. Anyway, that's for another day. But bike lanes, we need them. That makes our way of life on Lower Vancouver Island better.
Mhm.
It makes us healthier.
Mhm.
It makes everything more environmentally better.
Yeah.
Tick box, tick box, tick box. But boy, oh boy, project management wise, the thing was implemented terribly.
But people get the perception that it's anti-vehicle. It's sort of been us versus them a little bit more than it should be. I mean, we should have a discourse where we are talking about having bikes and having bike lanes, but it shouldn't be, well, people should get out of their car and get up on two wheels. It shouldn't be an either or. It should be, we should all have an opportunity to try different ways of transportation that we're comfortable with. Yeah.
Exactly. Matt, you're our guest. I'm gonna let you talk to this, but the communication and rollout part of this wasn't good.
Yeah.
But I love the bike lanes.
Yeah, it's been tricky. It's been tricky. I mean, I'm a dad. My kids are 4 and 8, and so I'm looking towards a city where they probably are going to be biking most of the time. Like they're going to be in a walkable, dense city where they're going. That's just, I'm not buying them a car. Like when I grew up in a rural area where everyone got a car when they were 16. Most kids got a big truck, and that's what you did. And I suspect as the city densifies, driving will be harder as there's more people. And I just want my kids to be active. Exploring by bike is so much fun, and it's just the fresh air on your face. And I think we have a long way to go on the bike lanes. That's my personal take. I'm in South Jubilee. We're surrounded by 3 roads without lanes, which is Richmond, Foul Bay, and Oak Bay. And truthfully, I can't really bike my son to school. He definitely can't go alone. And getting out for a bike ride, even getting downtown, like we went downtown the other day with both kids, and it was the most dangerous thing I'd done in a year. By far. Like we were going down on, Yates Street and a Canada Post truck parked, and my son, who's 8, pulled around it, but he kind of pulled into what would be the vehicle lane. And I was behind him, coaching him. And it's like, I wish we could just come down safely. Because as parents, we're dealing with screen time addiction. Our kids are addicted to YouTube, all this stuff that even us as kids didn't have. I had a knob. I'm not that old, and I had a TV with a knob. And
yeah, I'm addicted to all that stuff. What's wrong with that?
We need to get kids outside. So what's tough is there's solutions that aren't ideal. Like, I would have liked to see bike lanes on Cook Street. Vancouver Street for me is not an ideal street. I bike it quite often. It's got a big hill, and I don't know what happened in that consultation with Cook Street. And sometimes it's too bad you end up with a bit of a second tier lane.
Here's what happened. The original bike lanes, the ones on Fort and Pandora, were implemented and instituted without consultation of business. Imagine if you're a business there. All of a sudden, your vehicle access is taken away. It's under construction for a year. So this sort of mentality and momentum went into the Cook Street potential bike lane proposals.
Yeah.
The whole business community said, whoa, can we at least plan this? And it stopped. Matt, this perspective is one I don't often hear. It is one of a person living downtown with a younger family. And I please tell me more. Like, really, it's bike lanes is a component of a culture that you're telling me that I'd like to hear more about.
Yeah, I'm still learning as well. I grew up in color culture for the record. I'm from the interior. My family owned a stock car track growing up. My dad runs hot rod clubs. My dad is still a drag racer. I wanted to be a mechanic when I was most of my life. So, this is I'm not like born and raised in a bike family. I'm just learning. And now as I'm seeing, especially through the eyes of my kids, and I start going, what are my kids going to look like? What kind of city do they want when they're my age? And how many more people is Victoria going to have in 30 years? Let's say 50,000. Okay, so how do we take those cars? If everyone's going to have a car, where do they go? How busy are roads? Or is that just kind of going down the wrong path? And I mean, I think what we're seeing around the world is like people want to live in these denser, walkable cities where you can get on a bike, seniors can get on a bike, you can go around safely. And I want to start building that for them now. I don't mean that to be anti-car at any way. I drive a lot, Robin. Trust me, I love driving.
It is the way it comes across, though. I'm sorry. I mean, I don't like to I burst your bubble. I think bike lanes have a place, and I don't discourage it. But I think, well, I hear people saying, well, you got to get out of the cars because of the carbon footprint. Well, we're all moving into electric cars and hybrids. In 20 years, you won't see very many cars driving that aren't. And I think people still like the independence of their own vehicle. And when the weather is nice, that's great. Get on your bike and go for a nice ride. If it's pouring rain or windy or awful, people don't tend to do that very much. And I think that cycling is a seasonal thing. If you go out in the wintertime, even in Victoria, even with all the people that like to cycle, there's a lot of room to cycle. There's a lot of people that are in their vehicles. They're not taking a chance on a bike in the middle of the winter.
Yeah, I agree with, I mean, on this driving side, we drive. When we go to the beach, we drive. We are always driving, whatever, Clover Point, we drive down there. So it's finding a balance between those two. And again, looking at it through the eyes of a guy that's been riding around with my kids, it's not where I'd like it to be. And I think there's opportunity to make it work for both. I mean, yeah, absolutely. We're always going to need cars, delivery trucks. You have people. I'm going to be a senior one day, and I'm not going to be on a bike. But
it's great. You'll love it.
I had an interesting experience. I went down free diving at Clover Point the other day, and it was beautiful. I came out, the point was actually packed with people climbing on pipes, and there's a group of 5 older guys. I'm talking about 80, like quite old, and they were all on bikes with electric motors. And it kind of just sparked me, like, wow, this is something that's opened up for probably that's what I'd like to be doing at that age, to keep yourself healthy. I have 2 grandparents in town, and they're trying to bike more, and so I hope we can find that balance where it does work for everyone.
It's representative of a shifting culture.
Before we let you go, I do want to ask you a little bit about what your vision is for the future of the city in terms of our density and development of our city. And there's a big debate about what should be built, more rental, lower cost, or how do we manage these things? We have so many people coming in from all over the country that want to live here and are willing to pay top price. It's pretty hard to turn your back on that. If you're somebody building buildings, you could have a condo and make a fortune. Rental housing, lower rental housing, maybe not so much.
Yeah, we've covered this a couple of times on my podcast as well, trying to figure out what do we do about this. We did one on building height. We did one on, do you add density in the neighborhoods? I mean, I think here, my personal take is density does not scare me. I love the sense of vibrancy and community that comes along with density. Like my neighborhood right now, actually, my son doesn't really have any friends in it because there's really not that many kids here. And I think where people get scared on density is they think the roads are going to be faster. They think there's going to be safety issues. And I think you can address all of those things. So South Jubilee, where I live, we can take more density here, but we need to make sure that the roads are quieter so the kids can be out in the street. We need to make sure there's more parks. So the City of Victoria bought a new park in my neighborhood, Kasapi Park. And that's what you need to do if you want to accommodate more people. But density, that's where you get the vibrancy. You get more activities and you get more festivals and music and all that stuff. And that's exciting to me, but the balance is just like we talked about, is hard. What is it? I don't know. I think we can take more density here, but we don't want to ruin what we have either.
Well, in my opinion, and I've been working on this affordable housing, workforce affordable housing file a good 10 or 12 years. There are 2 things that are missing. There's a lack of supply, and there's a lack of courage and commitment on as far as municipal councils are concerned. Think of this area just in Victoria, from sort of Bay Street, you follow the 2 Government and Douglas Streets down, sort of down to Herald. That whole area there could be extraordinarily well developed. It could become a beautiful area of the city with a lot of density. That's in Victoria. And that would increase supply 100-fold. Why isn't that happening? No courage, no commitment, no vision.
Yeah.
The municipalities, the 3 of them out on the peninsula, same thing. They could expand housing supply a ton. Now, Langford,
there is a lot of agricultural land reserves, so it sort of forces them to be densely developed. If they want more development, it has to pretty well go up. They can't spread out.
There's a lot of land outside of the ALR. Now, we're seeing aggressive councils and vision out on the West Shore. Robert and I next week are going to be talking with the mayor around. Now, what do? You can't move around.
Langford
Langford, Colwood.
Well, I got into this. We did a podcast on Langford, and people said, "Oh, we're destroying trees, we're bulldozing this," and everyone went, "Yeah, that's so sad." And a bunch of people rightfully commented, "Well, hey, if you don't want to destroy the forest, guess what? You have to build the density in the core. You choose. You either build out into the ALR in the forest, or you build it in the core." And
Yeah,
I think it is that simple.
yes, it is.
Which one you want? And I'd rather say, well, let's do it in the city, but make sure we have the commercial, the coffee shops, the parks, the slow traffic, the bike lanes, the stuff that makes those big cities that you go to those incredible places. And
well, you know what? We're so privileged, actually, and honored. I used that word a lot today, didn't I, Robin? Honored, honored.
You use it continuously.
I do, but I really mean it. To have you on the show, and I'd love to have your perspective more frequently.
Yeah, hey? And I'd love to have you guys on our show. It's only that we do it once every 2 weeks because we're so busy with dads and working and stuff. But I'd love to do it more often. I really appreciate what you guys have done. I've listened to probably 70% of your shows, and you guys are pretty aggressive in a good way, and I like how it's called the Rumble Room. And you have boxing gloves as your logo. We're kind of more the conversation room, and you might put you to sleep a bit at times. But
oh man, you got to hear what we do, and we're not recording.
I heard it tonight. Yeah,
you got a little taste of it there. Yeah. No.
So I appreciate what you guys are doing, and it's nice to be able to support one another and not be competitive. Which I don't feel at all. And maybe we're making the world better. Maybe we're making it worse. I don't know, but. We'll see.
We're counting on it making it better, Matt, and I think we've taken a step in the right direction having you on today.
I really appreciate it, guys. I do appreciate it, especially you guys who have been around for so long and so much history. I don't know why I'm here, honestly, but hey, I'll take it.
Oh, Matt, thank you so much. So many great topics we reviewed today, and many more coming up next week. We've got a red hot show, a very exciting show next week. And it includes Christina Clark, somebody that I've gotten to know now over the last couple of years. Christina was the CEO of the Songhees Corporation and the Songhees Nation, and is now the Economic Development Officer of their Economic Development Corporation, and somebody that I have been talking to regularly about ways in which we can integrate our First Nations community into our regional community through economic development and business meets.
And she's going to approach a lot of stuff, John, that we've been talking about on this show from an economic development standpoint, including what's going on in Fairy Creek. If the Pashadat were to sit down with the government and the protesters, I mean, what could they come up with? What possible things could they do? It's very profitable to log. Are there other things that could be done? What other aids could there be in place for economic development for bands around Vancouver Island? And another thing she's prepared to talk about, I guess, is how we rebuild from the wreckage of finding those people in a grave, those victims in a grave in Kamloops. A lot of suspicion that there are many other graves around British Columbia. We keep talking about people who've got through the residential school system. How do they get through that? How do we march on to a better future together? And I'm sure Christina Clark will have some ideas about that.
Can't wait to chat with her and hear her opinion on these emergent societal issues that we're all trying to address and somehow deal with. Also on that show is the mayor of Colwood, Rob Martin, somebody I've chatted with, maybe 6 to 8 times during COVID. How are municipalities coping with COVID during that tough 2020? Man, Colwood has emerged and turned into the crown jewel of the West Shore. Sorry, Stu, not Langford anymore. But a key piece to all of that West Shore development is, of course, transportation. How do you move in and out of this place? It's tough. You can build as many houses as you want. The roads aren't getting any bigger. So can't wait to talk to Rob about the potential for a ferry to downtown. That used to be like a pipe dream, just way out there. Holy mackerel, it's actually now becoming maybe realistic. CRD directors talking about it. Anyway, that's something we're going to talk about next week.
They also talk about that rail line still, John? There are still people out there who still think we could have commuter rail. I heard somebody on my dog walk this week going on about it. So it's not like it's dead and buried. People are still talking about that.
Was he leashed?
My dog was not leashed.
Well,
It was
excellent.
a happy time for all of us.
Right. So I think folks are having a great time watching us, listening to us, especially to you. I'm learning so much from you. I'm constantly having so much fun with what we're doing here, and all of our viewers, of which in every week there's more and more, and important stakeholders listen to this show. So by all means, please support what we're doing here. Our website is the victoriarumbleroom.com. Go have a look. All of our videos are listed there. Of course, please like and share our posts that are on our Facebook page, which is victoriarumbleroom.com, facebook.com. And of course, we're on Twitter. I'm not sure how many people we link to there, but that's growing as well.
Thousands.
At
Thousands of
Victoria,
people.
at Victoria Rumble Room 1. And of course on YouTube, Victoria Rumble Room with Robin and John. And in case, through all of this fun, and in many instances, difficult discussions, my name is still John Jurisic.
And I'm Robin Adair. And rumble on.